Okay, so we gotta talk about Martha is Dead.
Why did you say that name?
I'm gonna start things off with our price point as well as our scores of the game. This game at full price is $30. I don't think it's worth that. $10, maybe $15 at most. For our meta scores, it's 78 with a user score of 5.7, as well as the Steam reviews being very positive as of right now.
Tell me how!
Next, I'm gonna get into the pros and cons of everything. First up, we got our pros. For our first pro, the game, it does have potential. The major cutscenes are very polished. This game also has an exploration in the tag, which it lives up to that. As far as the indie aspect goes, the game overall has very good graphics. For our last pro, it has a stream safe mode, so it's nice to see that these development companies are considering streamers in mind when they make these games now. But next up, we have our cons. For our first con, it's an offline game, but it couldn't tell if it wanted to lag or play in low res. Mind you, I have an RTX 3070 with this game running on Ultra, and it still didn't use up the full potential of the graphics card. This game is very large, and it's easy to get lost just walking aimlessly in circles for an extended period of time. The narrative as well as the voice acting is very bland in every aspect outside of the major cutscenes. The walking, oh my god, the walking. As far as this game goes, you walk at half the speed of smell, and it took me forever to find out that, hey, guess what? There is a running mechanic. Do you want to know why? Because the tutorial outside of the main aspect of the game, which is the tedious portion, doesn't tell you anything about the main game mechanics. Speaking of which, outside of the dream sequences, even your running pace is still slow. Your running pace outside of the dream sequences is comparable to that of a normal walking pace in any other video game.
What the hell?
Moving on, this game is finished, but still somehow feels rushed. Now keep in mind, when I say that the game is finished, but somehow feels rushed, LKA Studios produced a game called Town of Light back in 2016, then announced Martha is Dead back in 2019. Keep in mind, when this game was announced, there were some people that wanted this game to get finished as soon as possible. Understandable, but at the same time, they could have delayed this game to make sure that it was more well polished and doesn't feel just thrown together. As I said earlier, there is a tutorial in the game, however, it only focuses on the main tedious aspects of the game. It doesn't show you any of the main game mechanics outside of what to do when you're supposed to be fulfilling a task. Speaking of which, there's side missions in this game. I'm sorry, I'm not doing them because of how tedious the main tasks in the game are. But Jimmy, how good is the story, you may ask? Well, I say to you, it has no driving force. There is no real reason to continue to play this game past the first chapter. The first chapter is where everything exciting happens, and everything after that just feels kind of bland and meh at best. But I'm sure there's some cool aspects of the game. But yeah, there are some cool aspects to the game, but they become repetitive because you have to skip them. There's no automatic action completion function of this game. So in order for you to get to the end of the game, you have to complete repetitive actions which occur way too often, such as the reading, which is also done at the same pace as the walking. Outside of looking at the map, there's no directional or hint system to let you know that there's objects nearby that you have to interact with in order to move on to the next part of the story. So therefore, you're stuck until you figure out where to go. Now, while this game does say that it is a horror game, in between the horror parts of the game, it is literally a walking and reading simulator where you have to take pictures and then develop them a lot. As far as the protagonist and the antagonist of the story, you have Julia and her sister Martha. Julia's not a very compelling protagonist when it comes to this story, because when it comes to her actions, her speaking, anything she does, it's monotone. It's bland at best. But what about the antagonist Martha, you may ask? I only interacted with her a handful of times in this story, to the point to where when I did interact with her, I didn't feel as though I was in danger or there was any reason for me to feel afraid. Also, as I said earlier, they made a game back in 2016. It's called Town of Light, and from what I understand, the same problems they had in Town of Light, they have again in this one. They repeated the exact same outlier. They focus on the gore, not on the story. Well, guess what I need in order for me to be compelled to see this gore, the story. Whereas in most horror games, the gore is continuous or it's dropped in at some point in the story. This game does neither. There's too much time in between the gore and the horror aspect for me to consider this a psychological horror game. Psychological, yes. Horror, no.
How am I supposed to live, laugh, love in these conditions?
This one's kind of an in-between con. This game is available on Xbox as well as PlayStation and PC. Both Xbox and PlayStation in this version is censored to some degree, whereas the PC is completely uncensored. And if you have it on the stream safe mode, the only thing that it makes stream safe is the fact that it has copyrighted music and it cuts it out of the audio completely. For me, I give it a 1 out of 10. Now, I know I went on a little bit longer than my normal reviews. I couldn't do it in 90 seconds or less. It had too much wrong with it. But if you do like this type of content, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and click that little bell icon so you can get notified every time I upload. As for now, I'm out.
Why? Like, holy water. It's just water. But there's something special about it.